I think the main reason someone would start looking into Bitcoin is because of a triggering event. And usually that means they've done something where they've encountered friction in the system. Actually, a good example that I've seen myself and several other people hit this week is our credit cards getting declined, trying to buy things because we're not in the right country. So people who travel will probably run into some of this friction a lot more, or people who are doing things that are, kind of gray market or frowned upon. Whether that means like maybe you're working in the sex industry, or you're working in the decriminalized cannabis industry, which is still mostly locked out of the financial system in America. Those are the people who are going to experience the friction and therefore start looking for alternatives. The people who fit nicely in the bucket of the existing financial system are not going to hit the friction as much and are not going to be incentivized to look and try out other things.
Well, I think you have to, if you're a business owner, you're more likely to understand because you deal with the banks. And banks are not fun to deal with. Like, you can have your accounts frozen at any time, even if you're not touching crypto. Recently, for I think a few months ago or a year ago, one of the banks for my game company, Pixelmatic, it was frozen just because they were backlogged in doing a new KYC check. So our finance department submitted all of our paperwork, and just because they were backlogged, they froze the account. And fortunately, we're okay. We have extras, but that's very disruptive, right? Or if you're a business owner and you need to do wire transfers, then you understand the wire transfer system is very bad. In Europe, you have the SEPA transfers, but elsewhere you do normal wire transfers. You have SWIFT codes, routing numbers, intermediary banks, and fees on both sides. And if you deal with this stuff, you really understand the utility of Bitcoin. It's so cheap to send Bitcoin relative to that system, right? And it really just is a no-brainer if you're dealing with that system and you see Bitcoin. It's so simple. You might think it's complicated dealing with an address and long strings of letters and numbers and irrevocability, but it's actually better.
I think they should use crypto to store value. It's an immutable, really hard to seize asset, and that's tremendously valuable for people in any country, but especially in countries where their governments or their economic system is much worse off than like Western developed nations. So that's the way that I perceive the value prop of Bitcoin being, is it's a great store of value. And the store of value, by the way, doesn't mean price stable. Mm-hmm. It means hard to seize and immutable, amongst other factors. So Bitcoin represents a really good asset that people should use if they feel fearful about someone more powerful taking their value away from them. I'm not really sure if it's that useful for payments right now.
Mm-hmm. So, like in existing financial system, most of the people, they are users and they are just using technology just to perform the payment. And the Bitcoin will be approximately the same. So running the mining operations, running any financial operations, it's like running the business operations. It requires each day attention. It requires absolutely different attitude because you're running the business. And the same in the Bitcoin. If you would like to run the mining operations, it's like running the business. If you would like to provide the financial services, you're creating the business. Most of the users, they doesn't need to create the business. They own their own businesses. They need just the payment tools, just to perform the payment, just to receive the invoices.
Well, so I don't think that's who it appeals to right now. Who Bitcoin appeals to are like the people in Venezuela that are trying to get out from the Maduro regime, and they want to leave, but all their wealth is in their house and their car and stuff like that. So they sell everything for Bitcoin, move across the border to Colombia, and start a new life in Caracas. In Colombia. That's who it appeals to, because it is a necessity. So until it becomes a necessity, it's obviously for people that are libertarian or whatever, they understand it. For the general public, it's going to take some time, and that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, the Little Bitcoin book with 7 other authors. And really, it's making the case from a societal perspective why Bitcoin matters and why it's something that everyone needs to care about, because things are grossly unfair across the world. And even if you don't buy it, you need to understand that it matters for that reason. I mean, it's money, and like people don't realize that money is extremely important in any civilization. In fact, we don't know of any civilization that worked on any sort of barter system. Every civilization that we know of had some sort of money, and you need that in order for civilization to function, because otherwise you can't have division of labor. Like everyone needs to do everything in order to make anything work. So, in a sense, money is what I would call a base layer of civilization. Like civilization does not work without a good base layer. Right now we have a base layer that's constantly sinking, making people run uphill and everything else. So by changing that base layer, I think you improve civilization significantly. Anyone that's done any sort of computer architecture or real architecture or anything like that knows that the foundation is an extremely important part of anything that you're building. Well, money is a foundation of civilization. We have a terrible money right now. We have a much better money coming with Bitcoin, and it will swap out. It's going to be a long and painful transition, but once it's over, I think everyone will appreciate how much it's changed everything. It could be 5 years, it could be 100. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so that's where I think it really is important to focus on the savings aspect of it and not just the payments aspect. We have excellent payment systems already. Now, they do come with trade-offs. You know, they have worse privacy, they have worse user autonomy, less self-sovereignty, and those are bad trade-offs. But they also have good trade-offs in terms of consumer protections, being able to reverse payment, and then also just the convenience of it and the instantaneous aspect of it. Now, the other thing they have going for it is that the day-to-day value of most fiat currencies is stable. And so €1 today is going to be worth about €1 tomorrow. And so that's where it's like, okay, it doesn't really make sense to try to make Bitcoin compete on just payments. What we have to be competing on is the sound monetary policy of Bitcoin. And that's what has attracted more people than anything else. It's people looking at a price chart over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years. What has happened to the value of Bitcoin? It's gone up. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of volatility, and so it really is about, is the return greater than the volatility? And that's called the Sharpe ratio. And Bitcoin has a higher Sharpe ratio than any other asset. So owning Bitcoin means that you're going to make a higher risk-adjusted return than any other asset. And so that's where I think that people thinking about Bitcoin in terms of long-term accumulation, so that they are building up a nest egg, rather than thinking about it as kind of a transactional, like making day-to-day payments, it's a different mindset. So people have theorized this about Libra or about central banks issuing their own crypto, and we'll see. I think that what they're going to do is make existing centralized fiat systems more efficient, so that then they can say, "Oh yeah, we use crypto for this little thing here," but it really won't be the main thrust of what they want the future of the payment system to look like. I think that centralized governments and also private corporations, they want the future of payments to look like what it looks like in China, where everything is centrally controlled and it's fully transparent to the government. And so they can keep track of everyone's spending, and it's kind of a financial surveillance state. And they can use that to enforce taxes, for example. They can use it to enforce financial sanctions on countries and people like Iran. And they can use it for what's called capital controls, when people are speculating on, this country's financial system is going to collapse, I'm going to pull all of my money out. Or, China is going to invade Hong Kong, I'm going to pull all of my money out. If you have a centralized system, then the government or the bank can say, no, we're freezing everything, and now you can't take your money out. Or we're doing a haircut like in Cyprus, where they took 10% of the deposits. And so that's where I think that even though governments and private corporations are going to be creating stable coins that can become a medium of exchange, can become a payments system, rails that people actually use, ultimately they're going to cripple themselves by the fact that they do have centralized control over it. And the only way you can get people to, or get an asset to have a stable value is to have centralized control over it. You can't, like, there's theories about, maybe we can do like MakerDAO, on Ethereum, where this is a decentralized stablecoin. I think those things are going to collapse. And I think that they're going to collapse much faster than the centralized stablecoins collapse.